Greetings, Factorians. Welcome back to Factorio Demystified. We're going to, over the next several episodes, need to start covering some more complex topics. And this is a time of the game, as we ramp up into the mid-game, that can really be intimidating and confusing for new players. Some people get lost at this stage, so I'll try to keep it as accessible as possible. But please fire away in the comments below any feedback, any questions about concepts that maybe are unclear. And what we're going to focus on for this episode is what's traditionally known as the mall. Lots of credit to Catherine of Skye for really originating that some years ago. Nilaus prefers to call it the hub. I like the term supply depot. I think it's a little bit more descriptive of what we're trying to do. But more important than what you call it is what the depot does. And we want it to be a convenient place of access and production for all of the resources we need to resupply, to expand the factory throughout the life of the factory as we continue through the end of the game. So if we look at our inventory, we might be able to look at why this is going to be an issue for us. Already using over half of my space, and most of what I'm carrying I need to be carrying. There isn't a lot of dead weight here. We have all kinds of items that we can produce many more times than we did at the start of the game, and we're only about a third of the way through the research in Factorio, so this is going to multiply further beyond what it's currently at. And if we try to continue to carry around everything that we need to utilize, plus then also try to handcraft all of the new items that we're going to need, and have all of those materials on hand to be able to use, it is simply going to be unwieldy and virtually impossible to even carry around that much or deal with all of the time required waiting for items to be crafted. So that's not a real solution. Then if we take a look at the broader picture and say, okay, we'll just build production lines like we have over here, all over the place. We'll move around the map as much as we need to and just pick up the various resources from those locations where they're being produced all at once. Well, we would soon find that what we would end up doing is actually just having a situation where we're spending more time moving around the map picking up our supplies than we will actually using them. So that's going to create a big problem for us as well. And essentially, the community has come to the conclusion, well, we need a one-stop shopping center, aka a mall, where we can just get a bunch of these items at once. Now, if we zoom out, I'm going to have 3 sections to my depot design. And schematically, they're identical, but they'll be producing different items. Second one, first one, third one down here. We're just going to move our way down to the bottom one here in the south, the first one that's going to come off the bus. And by the way, the reason I'm doing a depot now and not, say, setting up a permanent research area or getting into oil or any of that is we want our supplies to come first. That is, they are the first products to come off the bus. And so whatever proceeds up to the north from the main bus from here, that is going to be what's left over after we've satisfied our basic supplies needs. So it's just a priority type of idea. And by the way, this may sound large or look large from north to south, but it's going to be at least as long from east to west. This is going to be a big area with a lot of items in it. So my basic structure here, if we just look at this section, we have 3 assembly machines. And that number is important because, as we've mentioned before, many things in Factorio comes in 3s. There's 3 tiers or 3 types of an item, and so it makes more sense than doing it 2 or 4 or 5 or whatever. On the outside, we're going to have various resources coming in. We probably don't need 4 transport belts or as much space in between the sections, but again, leave more space than you need. And then these 2 central ones are quite important. These are going to carry resources that are essentially going through the heart of this area, if you will, as it expands to the east. And these want to be commonly used resources in volume for this area. In fact, I like to have it so that each of these belts is going to have the same materials on it, both of them being the same, so that way any of our assemblers will always have access to whatever those key resources are. If we expand this out then and take a look at an example, we're going to do transport belts and their associated neighbors, if you will, that being the underground belts and the splitters. And then let's hook up our power poles here. So we know that we have 3 tiers of belts. We've got the starting ones, and then we have the red or fast ones, and we also have the blue or express ones coming later. And if we put a regular transport belt here, well, look at our splitter. That requires those. So that's one ingredient that can just be transported here. And then the underground belt also requires the regular transport belts. Then we can move forward in the tiers, because the underground, fast undergrounds, they require the regular undergrounds. And the same thing with our fast transports requiring transports, fast splitters requiring regular splitters. And we can proceed with that because the same holds further up here on the express ones. And also, the express ones are going to require a liquid made from oil known as lubricant. So I'm just going to put these pipes here to remind myself that we're going to need to have that come through. So now that we have this basic structure in place, what resources do we need? Well, 10 iron plates, 5 transport belts, okay? Iron and iron gear wheels, iron, electronic circuits, and transport belts. Alright, so definitely we're seeing that iron is a big commonality there. What about the next tier? Iron, electronic circuits, or iron gear wheels, electronic circuits, rather. Iron gear wheels again. More iron gear wheels, and a lot of them. And as we go up further, the express transport belts will take even more iron gear wheels. So, based on all of that, and some more items coming later, I'm definitely going to want iron gear wheels just as my central part here. And in fact, that's all I'm going to put on these belts. So we could start with that. And we're just going to want to pull some then off the main bus. And I'm just lining up the splitter. It's one below where I'm going to want it to come out, so that if we hook this up, and then we split these off to the right, then now this is going to line up exactly with where I'm going to want it to be. And of course, we're going to use our undergrounds to get off the bus. And then now we're into the shoulder. Zooming over. Okay, we have those. Now we also noted that for this row we needed iron. So let's pull this off. Now to come through this area here, I don't want any crossfire between the stuff coming through this way and through this way. So undergrounds really can be very useful here and gives us lots of space, lots of alternatives for where to put inserters and storage and everything else that's going to need to happen here. So we will take our iron from here. You're going to split off to the left. And that's crossing through this way as well. So now we have everything coming in here. Let's have some storage chests. Like so. And then we can have all of you moving through. Each tier up to the next one. I'm going to want splitters, 1 stack. Let's say 3 stacks of these faster transport belts for now, and of course a whole bunch more of the regular ones. Those are what we're using for the most part. I'll have 2 stacks of my undergrounds. And then of course these are also going to need to come over this way and over this way. And so the spacing here is perfect for a long-handed inserter. Okay, now we need to get our materials. So iron needs to be fed in here, here, and here. And we also need transport belts, or rather gear wheels. And I like to have gear wheels going into the transport belts from both sides, just to make sure they're getting plenty. Now, you just need circuits. You don't actually need gear wheels. But all of a sudden, these are beginning to operate. Okay, what do you need? You need gear wheels. So we're just basically filling in what else do you need at this stage. And we will go ahead and throw these in, again from both sides. You're going to need gear wheels as well. Okay, you can have some. But our only real problem at this stage is that we don't have any electronic circuits for up here. So let's fix that problem. Now, this will not really come into play until a little bit later, but we're going to want not just electronic circuits coming in, but we're also going to want advanced circuits coming in with them quite often. So I'm going to split this, or rather combine it, and so there's only one lane of the electronic circuits, and then there'll be the red advanced circuits coming there at another time. And that's one of those things where, you know, once you have played the game some, and I'm a little bit low here, so I'm going to put that up one more slot. But there are little refinements that you will come up with. And if you only had electronic circuits on this line going in, this would not be a big problem for you at all. You could simply put another line with advanced circuits and combine them later if you wanted to. It's not at all fatal to not do it. It's just very useful, so I'm going to add it on. There we are. And of course, I don't even need to pull these down in here because it's only the splitters on the end that need them. So we can just go like this. And now we can only have 10 undergrounds. Well, we've got more being made now. So we're being supplied with everything that we're going to need for our first two tiers of transport belts, splitters, and undergrounds. Next up, we have our inserters. A couple columns of 3 here working very nicely. Of course, this is only 6, and there is a 7th inserter, but I don't really care about the burner inserter. I'm not going to want to use those anymore at this point in the game. The foundation, if you will, of this setup is the regular yellow inserter, required for both the long-handed and the fast. Then fast inserters needed for filter and stack. Stack needed for the stack filter. So there's a nice flow to that. You can arrange it a few different ways, but this works very nicely. And then I'm not putting any storage chests up for the filter types because I don't use very many of those, if at all. I've just got them there in case I want to grab a few out of the assembler, but I could always throw that in. Again, there's plenty of negative space to mess around with. And then with the green electronic circuits coming down this way, I've actually moved these power poles. And since they overlap some, there's room for a little bit of adjustment, but that's just so our inserters can conveniently access everything they need to get. And we can't build the stack ones yet, because the red advanced circuits, we'd still need those coming in. But it's set up so that when they start coming, this will begin to produce. Now my next bit I want to do is oddball items that require the gear wheels. There's a few that I don't think fit too well anywhere else, and I'm just going to slap 3 right down here. We will go with repair packs, electric mining drills, and radars. And of course, we know we're going to need a bunch of these, especially the mining drills. But the repair packs are kind of borderline. I'm throwing them in. You can handcraft them, depending on your play style. If you do more of a build a wall and defend against the Novians approach, then you'd want quite a few more of them, of course. Now, I'm going to need the circuits for all of these. But instead of pulling it down here, because both of these columns are feeding off of this, so I want to basically skip a gap, and that way there's room for a different resource to come through here. Generally speaking, I don't want the same resource adjacent because we can just grab off of a artery from either side. So if we throw this in, and hop our way down, more power poles, and then what do we need here? Well, you need gear wheels. Let's bring this out further. And then you'll need those as well. And you'll also need iron, and so will you. Okay. So we can split that in. And that's what we'll use this particular gap for. And then we're going to need gear wheels, yep, here as well. So let's pop that over one more spot. There we go. Just throw that in there in case it's needed. And let's get some storage. And I'm going to do a couple spots for the drills, because I'm going to want more of those. But these other two, one is probably more than enough. And then now, I think we're prepared to move on to our assemblers themselves. And we will just knock you down for the moment. Create some room. Throw up another one here. Now, it doesn't really matter which direction I go in. Once again, we are doing a tier system here. We're going to have assembly machine 1, 2, 3 going in this direction. And each one feeding into the next. So I actually don't even want to store any of these. I just want them to move up. But since we're currently using the assembler 2s, I will put these in place. And then later they will move on when we unlock the assembler 3s. Okay, so what do we need here? Well, more gear wheels. This is actually where the gear wheels can stop, because they're not needed for this. So we will simply take them here. We need iron. Oops. Bring you in. Get the belt going the right direction. So you can come in this way. And that's everything you need, but you have an additional requirement. We're now going to need the steel. And this is the only item actually in this entire section that needs steel, but it's still rather essential, so see if we can add it to the fray. Of course, I didn't put it up in this slot because this splitter would be getting in the way. Just going to run it in this way, and we're definitely low. So I'll grab some more of those. I think I could use some more splitters as well. And I don't need a splitter here. I just need to run it in. It'll only be needed for the one location. Now, our advanced tier 3, let's make sure that we're only limiting you to one stack, but our tier 3 of the assembly machines also requires a module. And we're going to be working with modules much more later in the game, but for our present purposes, what we want to observe is that there are 3 types of modules, and there are also 3 tiers. And so I figure this is as good a spot as any for us to just slap those up. We will put another 3. Keep grabbing more machines. Thank you very much. And then, of course, we will want our power poles distributed around. And we'll get into building all of what is needed for these modules later, but whenever they are made, you can bring those right back over here, and then that will give us our tier 3. So this is all I'm going to put up for the first section, and believe it or not, the next 2 are actually going to be at least as large as this one, if not more. There is a lot more to build, but this one is by far the most straightforward, I think. So I spent a little bit more detail on this than I will in the others, just so we can fully understand the basic 3-tier concept. Before getting into the weeds on what I'm building here in this second section, I really wanted to emphasize for a bit the importance of personalizing your approach to the depot, especially compared to the rest of the factory, which can tend to be somewhat more standardized. Now, there are some basics. We all want transport belts, power poles, assemblers, etc. But there are also many items that vary, and I see people debating. There's posts on the Reddit, Ultimate Factorio Mega Mall. Every item in the game from beginning to end, all built here. Why would I want that? That's a waste of time and resources. Some of those items I'm not going to want, and they're going to be different from the items other players don't want. Real obvious example is just power. Steam power is something that I've gotten off of as soon as I can for pollution reasons. Some players don't care about pollution, so they think solar power is boring. They're going to stick with steam power for a much longer period of the game. And there are many points of differentiation like that. So this is not an ultimate solution. It's not one size fits all. Please don't build this just because I built it this way. What I'm looking for presenting here is sort of a thought process, a mindset. This is how I chose, and then adapt it to your own goals and use for your game. So what I did start off this section with is, now that we have the basics in place, I wanted to use the iron ore and the water that we mentioned. Iron ore is only needed in concrete, and water in concrete and refined concrete. And concrete's used for items, a couple of them later on, as it's streaming down here, but then also we can place it on the ground for faster travel. And there's some items we're going to run into that we are not using yet in the game, but we're still getting them ready. Then I said, okay, we'll bring the stone in here as well, using that on rail for the trains, and landfill for filling in water areas with land if we need to do that. And then, well, the rails require iron sticks. So what else requires iron sticks? And I'm just looking for points of synergy here. Well, we've got power poles that do, and then power poles require both steel and copper. Steel and copper go together in a fair number of items, but not a huge number. So I thought, okay, this section, I will build everything that requires the steel and the copper together, and then just put them together on a belt. And then we have stone bricks. Those are needed for a small number of items, but one of them is concrete, so they can just move right along. And there was some synergy between all of that and pipes, which are a little bit more widely used, as we've talked about before. So I said, okay, pipes will go on my center lanes. Got another assembler over here, along with iron gear wheels. And so that gave me my basic setup for what we're doing in this section. So it's sort of a hodgepodge. You notice we don't have the neat 3-tier setup that we did for the first section. We're having to just fit things in where they might make sense to go. And there are some open spots like here and here, but those are reserved for future use. For example, this one is going to be our electric furnaces once we get them. Another item that requires the stone bricks, and that's why I don't have any furnaces up anywhere else. Now, a technique worth noting here is belt weaving, and I'm using it here to basically have 2 resources coming through this way. And the way it works is the underground belts connect only to other undergrounds of their same tier. In other words, the yellow ones are not going to connect to these fast ones. And that's why I can sort of crisscross here to get the iron down here where I need it, but yet get the steel up here where I need it for my storage tanks. Now, thematically, we're looking at some power items in here. We are looking at a lot of train and a lot of fluid or oil type of items. So we have, for example, our pump jacks, and we've got our wagons for the trains, and we've got our locomotives, and then we have our oil refinery, chemical plants, and you have to be kind of careful with the oil refinery. It's one of the hardest things to get everything around to build because it requires 5 different ingredients. But with the setup I have, I was able to make all of that happen. And then onward down here, we're going to be doing some ammunition, and the reason this is here is because, again, it's got the steel and copper required for part of it. So there are going to be more ammunition coming down this way. There's going to be the combat robots that we talked about, and then I also have my wonderful solar panels being produced here. And then finally, section 3, which is smaller for now. It's not going to stay that way, but it's smaller for the moment. And one of the main themes here is that no iron gear wheels. Everything with gear wheels is being produced elsewhere. So if you recall the double splitter approach from our smelting, we've kind of got the same thing going on here. We're splitting iron and steel. There's going to be a lot of steel used here. I could have switched out the iron for the green electronic circuits and then had, iron combined with the red circuits on one of these or whatever. But this is the way I chose to do it. Now, it's also worth noticing the question of, do I group items by the materials required to build them, or do I group them by their theme? Because I have signals here for my train tracks, but this is most of my train items are down here, but I didn't need the same materials for them. I like to group by materials more. I find it a little bit more convenient logistically. There's a few items that need copper cable, so we've got those spread out here. And again, there's lots of empty spots here because we're going to be adding a lot of what's going to be happening here later. There's some advanced chests that we're going to want, so I've got the steel chest beginning for that. And then there's coal for various items down here. Grenades are starting here. But there will be a lot of ammunition and military items coming up this way. There will be oil products that will be coming over here, and that'll allow us to fill in some new territory. So this is by no means complete. It is simply set up with, this is a framework for what I have now, and then as we continue to unlock new advances, we'll plug them in. There is one more resource that we can, quote, mine automatically if we choose, and that is, I just have these inserters set up to actually grab fish out of the water. We'll see this in just a moment as this one swims around. It needs to get close enough to the inserter. But as a practical matter, this is not at all a necessity. Once you get vehicles like our car and are driving around in them for combat, I don't think you're at the point anymore where you need fish to really help your combat abilities. But it is out there if you want to participate in it. As we progress further in Factorio, we will be looking at more and more of the items that we're building in the depot, but not yet putting into practice. I do want to emphasize one right now, though, that can help us immediately, which is the blue fast inserters. Got them down here. I've expanded the quick bar to 3 slots and done some reorganizing. Put some new items down there. But if there are cases where our regular yellow inserters just aren't cutting it, the increased power usage from the fast inserters is not a concern. Our overall inserter power draw is quite insignificant in the grand scheme of things. So we are going to go ahead and deploy these in such situations, such as here, where we're requiring 40 iron gear wheels for a 2-second crafting time. And at our current levels of technology, that means a regular yellow inserter can move about 5 in here instead of 40 in the time this will take to craft. If we yank this out, and we can see our fast inserter moving away and doing a much better job than we would expect otherwise. And then it'll start crafting another one. And we get down to the point where it's going to move about 12 or 14 in that time. So it's going to help us speed-wise, but it doesn't completely solve it. Of course, I could just add more fast inserters, like one here, for example, to make that even more of a gain, but I don't really think that's necessary in the depot. We're going to be running off doing other things, then coming back to get items from here. I just don't want huge delays, but I'm not going for 0 delay. When it comes to our mass production lines, though, for example, over here with our electronic circuits and our gear wheels. Now, these all have very fast crafting times, and when we're talking about our production lines like this, where we just want to make sure there's no delay in this particular case, build as much as you can, then I'm going to want to replace these anytime that it's going to be useful, and it will be useful in these areas, to the fast inserters in place of the regular inserters, so that the machines are not waiting on material to be moved, but they can just keep going and going and going and not have those delays. Now at this stage, we want to deploy all of those fast inserters wherever we might need them, but also we're going to take down almost the entirety of our jumpstart factory. The only thing I'm going to leave up really is our steel production, because that's still heading up to the bus. But all of this science area is completed because we don't have any more red and green science that we can actually produce. And all of this is totally obsolete and has been ignored for a while now. So I'm going to take all of that down. We're going to move our operation up here and get our permanent science area in place next.